Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third part of an 8-part series on the cycle of phases and aspects with Mars and Pluto. Today's segment 1 class, recording April of 2020, will be on Mars, Pluto, and first quarter phase. However, before we get to that, our housekeeping slides. Our YouTube channel is somewhere in the ethers and somewhere in the queue of coming back on. So if you have any specific classes that you want to study with us as a registered associate, please email us. We have an alternative way of getting the classes to you, especially if you are someone who needs help with the math review on the cycle of phases and aspects. We have a specific class for that. Also, with Venus retrograde coming up, I'm going to do my regular Venus retrograde special, in which I will do a compatibility with the additional chart, no extra charge. Doesn't have to be an intimate relationship, can be parent and child, co-workers, any type of compatibility that you may be interested in. Here is the screen for the cycle of phases and aspects as it was developed by Dane Rudier in his book, The Lunation Cycle. He did this in regards to the sun and moon. Jeffrey Wolf Green's teachings took it a step further. And most of us with EA now look at the cycle of phases and aspects between any two planets or between any planet and a point in space. Here is how we determine aspects to planets. We start with the slower moving planet, and we compare it to the faster moving planet in a counterclockwise fashion, as you see on the screen. There are some evolutionary astrologers who have changed one variation to Jeffrey's original teachings. Jeffrey Green said you compare everything to the sun. I compare the sun to the outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn on out. So I start with the sun and compare Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars to the sun. But I start with the planets Jupiter on out and compare the sun to those planets. As you can see by example on your screen with Saturn, I started with Saturn, went in a counterclockwise fashion to the sun, and the sun is balsamic phase to Saturn. In determining aspects to the nodal axis, you always start with the planet regardless of how fast or slow it's moving, and you compare the nodes to the planet in a clockwise direction. And this is because the mean motion of the nodes 90% of the time is clockwise or reversing through the signs and houses of the zodiac. Here are the samples for you on your screen. And as I said, you need more help, contact us and we will send you the specific class which goes through all the math with both of these. With Pluto, there are 4 types of evolution known within the soul. 2 are non-cataclysmic, 2 are cataclysmic. I am just going to let you look at these on your screen. I refer you to earlier classes if you want more example for this. I am just going to move us through some of these slides just as a little bit faster than normal so that we can get to the new materials for today's class. We also will have 2 volunteers instead of 1, so I want to allow as much time as possible to actually look at the charts. In addition to the non-cataclysmic and cataclysmic evolution with Pluto the Soul, there are 3 reactions to the evolutionary impulse. We can resist altogether, and we can go for it wholeheartedly in a non-resistant way. Both of those reactions are rare. The most common is being willing to change in some ways, yet resisting the changing in other ways. The resistance to changing is due to the fear of the unknown and the desire to be secure. Security many times is projecting the past forward and repeating it. Now, with Mars, Pluto, we have what we call primary lifetimes and secondary lifetimes. The primary lifetimes are when Mars is in one of the 45-degree specific aspects to Pluto. I have a tendency to use a smaller orb applying and a little bit larger orb separating. You see the degrees on your screen. So if you look at Mars to Pluto going 0, 45, 90, 135 degrees, etc., you will see that there will be somewhere between 8 and 9 primary lifetimes. In between that, there can be multiple secondary lifetimes where the soul will be working on that Mars-Pluto phase indirectly. So keep in mind here that the soul has free choice and free will to take as long as it wants or to go as fast as it wants in regards to the Mars-Pluto cycle of phases and aspects, which many times will be grounded to Pluto in a specific house. Here's your primary lifetime examples, those 45-degree aspects listed there on your screen. This is also known as the harmonics of 8, or taking the circle, dividing it by 8. Secondary lifetime examples, 30 degrees, 72, the trine of 120 or 240. The secondary lifetime examples, again, they are aspects that are not 45-degree angles. In addition to that, Mars and Pluto can be in a phasal relationship with no specific aspect. That will actually be the examples that we have with both of our charts today. Remember, Mars will always have a phasal relationship to Pluto, whether or not there is a specific aspect. Now, one of the primary questions is, do souls go through lifetimes in consecutive Mars-Pluto phasal relationship order via a specific natal Pluto house? Answer, who knows? No one does know. I think, this is Kim Marie's opinion, I think we do end up living a primary lifetime in one of those 8 45-degree primary aspects of Mars-Pluto, with Pluto in a specific house, and we go through all 12 houses, Pluto in all 12 houses, with Mars making all of those phasal relationships. I think we can go back and forth and have Pluto in the second house in one lifetime, Pluto in the sixth house in another lifetime, Pluto in the 11th house. It all ends up coming together in a complete circle, regardless of Mars to Pluto in a specific house. But I don't think it's linear. I think it can be a little more complicated than that. Time will tell. Jeffrey Green used to say, if we knew how many lifetimes we had lived, we would be depressed. There's a reason why. We have an unconsciousness, and it takes a very expanded state of awareness for a soul to be able to hold all of its lifetimes in consciousness. Now here's another visual for you, putting Pluto at 0 degrees. And you can see right here by Mars glyph on your screen how we look at each of these 8 different phases. And so where we are going to go specifically today is we're going to look at Mars from 90 degrees from Pluto to 135 degrees. And within that, we're going to have 4 aspects: the 91, 92, 93 degrees of a first quarter square, the biseptile, the trine, and then the less than 135 degrees sesquisquadrate aspect. And because I have 2 volunteers, I'm going to put their chart examples after the aspect that is closest to the degrees of their Mars-Pluto angle. So here again, listing these phases for you. And remember, life is always in a state of continuous change or evolution. We know this through the archetype of Mars, Aries, first house, as we are always identifying a desire and acting upon it. And that 0 to 360 degrees is a complete cycle of evolution from birth, growth, bloom, decay, to death and rebirth again. And one more time, every planet or point in space is in a phasal relationship to every other planet and point in space, whether or not there's an aspect. So when you start with interpretation, you understand it from the phase first, and then you add on the details of the aspect. So one more time on your screen, this is what we're going to be working with today with Mars and Pluto. So first of all, the first quarter's phase from 90 to 135 degrees. It is known as Yang, and the key word for this is crises in action, coming specifically from Dean Rudier's teachings. It is the need to establish and make new whatever the desire is between any two planets. We need to manifest it, Yang phase. We need to make it real. And it will always relate back to whatever the original impulse is of the new phase, which you will know by looking where that slower moving planet is by its house. This is what we call again that crises in action. And what will happen here, and especially as we are really close to the 90-degree aspect, the fear of failure is intense, and there is a fear of sliding backwards. I can't do it. I can't really manifest or bring this forward. I think I'm just going to go back to my security and what I know and stay stuck in the old pattern. So we will also find that when we are at that 90-degree mark and moving to 95, 100, 115, there can be a diversity of choices in trying to figure out how to move forward and manifest that initial impulse from the 0-degree mark. The first quarter phase will also relate to its opposite phase. Just like every sign and house has a polarity sign or house, every phase has a polarity phase. And the opposite of first quarter is last quarter. And so first quarter is crises in action versus the last quarter, crises in belief. And so what happens here is relative to that last quarter phase, everyone else knows more than we do. Everyone else has already manifested their choices. And this is why it puts that pressure on us to strike out on our own and be unique and manifest what we desire moving forward. So that whole point from 0 to 90 degrees, its disseminating phase and last quarter phase polarity, other people and society in general knows more than we do. So it's a push-pull with that tendency to retreat or go backwards. And when we get to that 90 degrees and we move forward through that phase, we have to manifest. The pressure is so intense, we can't go backwards anymore. And so this is how we understand then that 90-degree aspect or first quarter square. We have to give individual meaning to whatever that new evolutionary impulse is between Mars and Pluto, and we have to work to manifest it. It creates the attention. Just everything we described in the first quarter phase is specific to the first quarter square aspect. That creative tension between moving forward versus the temptation to go back. And the problem of moving forward is, again, it's the unknown future. It is new, so we don't know how to manifest it. No, been there, done that yet. And it will feel like we are up against everything that constitutes our past. And when you make this specific to Mars Pluto here, you have that Pluto sign and house. And as we know, that's where the soul retreats to for security reasons. That is the past relative to that Pluto sign and house. And Mars is trying to help us break free from everything relative to that Pluto sign and house. So you can just start to understand and interpret all the pressure that Mars has relative to all of those Pluto sign house dynamics. And then from that evolutionary standpoint at this aspect, the new forms have to be actualized and established before we can move on. So a soul will take however many lifetimes necessary at the first quarter square aspect until the new form and the new desires are actually established. Is there a specific way to know how many lifetimes it will take? No, not directly. However, if Mars is 91 degrees from Pluto, it's possible that it may be the first lifetime of this relationship between them. We don't know if it's going to be the second or third. But if Mars starts to be 93 degrees, 94, 95, or as we're going to look with our chart example, 96 degrees, we start to know that there's probably been another lifetime or two of Mars in this first quarter square aspect to Pluto. And the further that Mars creeps along 91, 93, 97, degrees, then that soul has been really working from the point of view of Mars to manifest whatever those Pluto desires have been relative to that sign and house. So now let's look at our chart example here. And I'm going to quickly read the examples on the screen for us. And I'm actually going to look at my clock and try to do 30 minutes with each chart example. Class will obviously go longer because I'm going to try and stick to a 2-hour class. And so with this chart example here, the Mars-Pluto angle is 96 degrees. If we start with Pluto up here at about 19 degrees Leo in the 9th house, Mars has moved 96 degrees to 25 Scorpio in the 1st house. For the chart recording, the data is September 18th, 1950, 10:37 a.m. in Sioux City, Iowa. This chart example feels that she is transitioning third individuated to first spirituated. She middle class. Her parents were pregnant with her when they married, and it was quite the scandal. Father was Catholic, mother was Protestant, I think. Both of my chart examples had the same situation, ironically. And back in those days, it was quite the scandal. And being from that neck of the woods, I can relate to all of that. Family moved to Arizona when she was 7 to escape all of the pressure. She has one younger brother. Mom was a nurse. Dad was a machinist who had health issues his whole life. It led to abuse of drugs and alcohol, and she also experienced physical and sexual abuse with her father. I don't know exactly the years or how long. Our volunteer might fill that in for us. Mom was silent. Yes. And okay, sorry everybody. Leroy needed to know who the volunteer was, and so there you go. There was a lot of Catholicism in this volunteer's upbringing, although she was pretty rebellious towards it, even though she was introverted. She was into metaphysics, astrology when she was really young, always searching for the truth. She went through her hippie phase lifestyle with experimenting with recreational drugs. She currently is a retired nurse. She spent 42 years in the nursing profession, which included some hospice work. She's the classic runaway bride. She was engaged 3 times, never married. She did have a son out of wedlock, which again repeated the family scandal. She has 2 grandchildren. She is very close to her son and her grandchildren. Parents are both deceased. And so I'm just going to start to put in a few little details here, just with specifics to the Pluto-Mars relationship. Volunteer, then Leroy will unmute you, and hopefully we will all be able to hear you speak clearly as well. If we look at Sol, who is 9th house Pluto and the Pluto in Leo generation, you see that Leonian creative spark to just search 9th house. Search for broader understanding. Search, I have a tendency to say that 9th house Plutos are the philosophers of the zodiac, and they are souls that are very right brain oriented. We have a caveat here with the soul having a south node in Virgo and having 4 planets in Virgo, 3 of them in a conjunction to the south node. South node is applying conjunctions to all 3 of those planets, including its ruler Virgo, which is Mercury, and that Mercury retrograde you see there. That interaction will tell us that this 9th house Pluto could have a switching of its brain between that right brain 9th house and left brain, all of the Virgo impact that goes on there. If we look at Mars, though, starting to come into this picture and being I'm pretty open here. You can say Mars is a first quarter aspect to Pluto. You can say that it's starting to move beyond it and it can be moving into that first quarter phase. To me, I am willing to work with this either way. But Mars not being at 90 degrees or 91 degrees, the soul is starting to get a handle on this first quarter square aspect. And what are we going to see just from Mars in Scorpio in first house? I have got to break free. I have got to be me. I've got to have my sexual freedom. She was sexually rebellious when she was younger. I have got to have my freedom to be in charge of my own life, to be my own authority, to live my life however I want to. There were issues all through her young adult years with the parents, especially when she got pregnant out of wedlock. So you can see right there that crises of having these experiences in finding herself take place, and relative to that last quarter phase and parents, planets in the 10th, having all of the judgments, having all of the condemnations, having all the crises of feeling like she wasn't free or she wasn't doing it right, being judged religiously, being judged parentally and societally. And yet, through that, this is a soul who's just had to move forward. She found 3rd stage individuated, first spirituated, the courage, Mars in its own first house, of breaking free, of moving forward, leaving She moved away from where the community where she was born. She ended up moving back before her mother passed, but she moved away to be free, to find herself. Just this, in addition to Mars being this first quarter phase and aspect to Pluto, it's in its own first house. That freedom is just intensified here. Let me see if Leroy has been able to unmute our volunteer. Volunteer, speak up if you would like. Or Leroy, let
Okay.
us know.
Okay. Hi,
I
Kim
hear
Marie.
you. Hi.
You hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you
Okay.
just fine.
All right. Yeah, that everything that you were spot on. Everything you said was really true. Um, yeah, I feel like this is one of my primary lives, even though I'm like 5 degrees, 6 degrees
Mhm.
from that square because of that Virgo stellium, and it's a square to the Chiron and my moon as well. I've had like overcome just some huge obstacles. A humanistic astrologer told me back in the 70s, he said, looking at my chart, he said, if I wasn't a humanistic astrologer, I would say your chart is afflicted. So I've I've overcome a lot in my life, many, many, many obstacles, and kind of always ended up standing on my own 2 feet, sovereign. And I think it's a lot of that Mars because it's sextile that stellium, so that has really helped me with my career and just being out in the be able to be successfully out in the world. That was one advantage, but
Gotcha.
yeah.
I put my pointer on for you when you're talking so I can listen.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
as you were looking at the slides and we were, moving through some of these archetypes,
Hmm.
is there anything else additionally that has sparked for you relative to Mars and Pluto, or any other life experiences?
Um, it had really has been the frustration that I have felt trying to move forward, trying to, I felt like I was really involved in that karmic South Node with that stellium 10th house Virgo. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really tough. And so I really spent most of my life super frustrated about moving forward. And so what you did say about that, just really needing to um,
Mm-hmm.
break free and move forward, that's been a predominant theme in my life, to say the
Yes.
least.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
if we look at the at this south node, balsamic to Sun, Saturn, and Mercury here, you know, the most common reaction is a mixture of fruition and relive when a planet is conjunct the south node.
Hmm.
And not to say that you didn't have time periods where things would just magically, kind of manifest from
Hmm.
prior life efforts into fruition, but that factor, with this, and the sun is a ruler of Pluto by
Yeah,
generation, and
yeah.
so that brings this all into that karmic complex for you. And I would wonder, okay, if there were past lives where you never had that freedom due to parental environment or due to 11th house societal structures in which you could do this first quarter manifestation. And so all this kind of builds up here to an intensity. You know how Virgo can sometimes be all the procrastination complex,
Yeah.
and I think for you this would pressure would just build up, and
Hmm.
this is the release valve. So
Yeah.
the release valve for you would by nature be highly sexual activity, be it the Taurian South Sex or the Scorpio merged with another
Hmm.
sexuality,
Hmm.
that would come in and just be a natural part of the picture for you of relieving frustration so that you feel that you can then mm, instinctively act forward in ways that you wanted to. Um, Go ahead.
Maybe, but it was also what that, the whole sextile to that stellium, which
Mhm,
I think was more the in a past life, the church, the patriarchy.
mhm,
No accident. That my Saturn is in Virgo, conjunct to that South Node, and it's square my mother, my Moon in Sag, and so it was a strong patriarchal influence. It was probably religious or some type of cloistered situation with all that Virgo there.
mhm,
Um, yeah, and so I see that with that Mars, that energy was kind of an easy, uh, it was conducive for all of this. And as far as the sexuality, yeah, it was really, I mean, it was the 60s, it was free love and, you know,
mhm.
LSD and parties and stuff. So yeah, I mean, that was exactly the expression, let me tell you. And then there was the guilt, though, and the Catholic, the South
Mhm,
Node,
mhm.
balsamic, all those Virgos and the guilt and the victim, the drama triangle. So it was just like, it's kind of like being in hell too. It was great, but it was like hell also.
Sure, sure. If you feel comfortable, volunteer, you said in your environmental conditionings that there was physical and sexual abuse with father.
Hmm.
Do you remember a time frame age-wise?
I was probably 7 to like, okay, for like the weird touching and just kind of weird things that I just remember snippets of. Probably 7 to like um, 10 or no, maybe 12 or so. But then the violence was there from the time I was about 7, 8, or 9, all the way through. I mean, he was, till I was like, I told him if he touched me again, I would press charges, call the police on him. So that like went all the way through. I was really acted out with that Scorpio first house, Mars
Mhm,
and Scorpio. I mean, I was like, I was tiger defending
mhm,
myself, and he was
mhm.
a Scorpio too. So it was like, ugh, yeah, it was intense.
There was a little bit of cutting out. Did you say he was a Scorpio sun?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
What degree Scorpio? Do you remember?
Oh, he was November 12th. Um, and I don't have his time, but have yeah. Let me see here.
I got it for you very quickly. November 12th would put that sun between 18 to 20 degrees. And so it was just inside your first house.
Yep.
It was
Hmm.
in a conjunction to this Mars, and
Yeah.
obviously his sun was, a pretty tight square to
Yeah.
your natal Pluto. So you can see and it's quite possible with this Virgo stellium signature here, it wasn't the first lifetime
Yeah.
of,
yeah, past life
yes.
regressions where he was there, and it was
Mhm,
he was a dominant kind of mean force, that, yeah.
mhm.
Hmm.
Sure,
Yep.
sure.
Yeah.
And so relative to all that, then I know that you probably have done this, but I just want to verbalize it for somebody who's newer to astrology. Relative to your ninth house Pluto, you probably have been
Hmm.
through the alternative studies and therapies to try to get a broader ninth house soul understanding. Why did I draw this to me? What can I learn from this? What's the broader picture from this? And as I have learned the principles of natural law, how do
Yeah.
I break free one more time, that first quarter square,
Hmm.
from all of these
Wow.
sexual distortions, and, really moving forward, being loving, gentle with myself, with others.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Um, yeah, and I've done a lot of shadow work. I recently did a really astrology in your shadow, looking at my chart in relation to shadow.
Mhm.
And so that, and I've done some past life regression on it too. I'm not sexually active now. I haven't been for a while, a long time. But so I'm past my interest, let me tell you.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I'm
that
not.
is,
Go ahead.
no, um, an expression for me at this time. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm not able to. I don't know if you're hearing me okay, volunteer, but you started out just great when you were talking, and I could hear everything. But as we've been going on, this last part's been cutting out, so my apologies, and hopefully the
yeah,
recording will have this on both ends. Um,
you kind of cut out on that last bit on me too.
sure, we're gonna plug forward, bless the virus. Bless the
Oh,
virus for everything it's
uh-huh.
teaching us, huh? Ninth house, Pluto.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I, I, I have to
Um,
say, I have thought about you, and over the last week when I realized you were the volunteer, and I'm going, I'm glad you're retired. Although if you choose to be active in it, I understand. But yeah,
active in what?
active in going back into this nursing profession with the virus. So,
No, actually, astrological thing, but it's been a year, and it was my accident was the day after Pluto stationed retrograde last year, um, and it was also square Eris. So that was my career-ending accident when I broke my knee. And now I just got off the phone with my attorney, and I'm in the process of settling. And Pluto is stationing retrograde on the 25th, square Eris too. So it's like,
mm-hmm,
oh, I'm watching this
sure.
the aspect. So
Um, so obviously with the Mars signature and your conditionings, it was there to look at the whole, some of that sexuality archetype, including not wanting to be fenced in regards to an intimate partner. That's all
yeah.
been part of that picture too.
Mhm.
Relative to the whole archetype of the ninth house, would you say there are other what other themes for Mars Pluto would you care to share? Um, I can bring some up, but I want to hear from you.
Um, well, with Mars in Scorpio in the first
Did you,
house. Oh,
yeah, well, let me ask you this, with this
go
Mars
ahead.
Pluto first quarter square and then these planets in 10th, did you find that throughout your career, um, were there time periods where you felt you had to buck the system or bosses or authority figures? Okay, I'll let you speak.
Yes. Yes, actually, my last real big um, dance with authority, because I was like terminated a couple times, but my last real big dance was my friend and I were trying to start a union at a hospital in Phoenix, and I was fired, and for that, and we filed myself and my friend did all the work and filed the NLRB suit against this hospital corporation, and we won, and charges had to be posted, and it was a big deal.
Wow.
And so yeah, that was really my last. So I was always challenging authority, and it got me in trouble, but I've always landed on my feet. That's what's really divine about this whole thing, is I've always just, and moved on. And that's another thing, I've like really been in some pretty perilous situations, and I've been able to like land on my feet and move on. So I'm wondering if that isn't part of this Mars um, first quarter square to
It
Pluto.
would it would also, if I can, Mars, the Pluto polarity point is here in
Hmm.
the third house at 19 degrees Aquarius. So
Hmm.
Mars is making, and we have a tendency to compare the planets to the Pluto polarity point, okay?
Hmm.
Just because it is so germane to the EA teachings. So Mars is in that last quarter square to the PPP,
Hmm.
and this would be your ability to be flexible. And so Mars will sometimes acquiesce here to this polarity point, and rather than the ninth house Pluto. So Mars gets very dynamic here between Pluto and its polarity. Ninth house Plutos, you got, and the Leo generation, there can sometimes be a fixicity here, if I'm saying that correctly. The philosophy of the ninth house says I know it all.
Yeah.
And these Virgo planets then that will move into self-analyzation one way or another relative to the third house polarity point allows this flexibility to come in. And while we have Mars in Scorpio, relative to it being in its first house, that frustration of Mars Pluto first quarter, well, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
Remember, we have to
Mhm.
try
Yeah.
until we get it.
Yeah.
That
Hmm.
adds then into its last quarter square with the polarity point of a certain amount of flexibility. And that's that
Oh, okay.
landing on your feet that you
Hmm.
described. Make
Yes.
sense?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yes. And even this last time with breaking my knee, I came out far better than I could have ever imagined and am right now. So, yes, once again, that's a theme, really, is that ability to land on my feet, move on, and it be a better move. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a backsliding move.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
so let me just check in with you and see if you have any questions for me relative to the Mars Pluto. And Leroy, if there's any questions from the board, perhaps they could uh, uh, type them out to just have less people live for sake of hearing. Volunteer, any questions from you or any other archetype? We can't get into every ninth house archetype, but anything?
I feel like that Mars is so strong in first house Scorpio. Um, it's home there, and so I feel like it is there's like a block there sometimes in that first quarter square, and I really feel like I've been blocked also in my life. I think I've gotten all the 10th house graces of being able to land on my feet, but certainly on a spiritual quest, I felt like really blocked or stymied. So that I can, I feel that
Mm-hmm,
intensity.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Virgo energy, and
Yeah.
you can even bring in that polarity point because with Moon square the nodes, the
Hmm.
North node is active in past lives, as well. There's a need for a gentleness with yourself,
Hmm.
and sometimes even a need for gentleness with others, although I am by no means saying unhealthy boundaries, okay? um but that Virgo energy, it really requires a self-love and a self-forgiveness, and a gentleness with self, and that then allows you to the Virgo 1 foot in front of the other, try again, try again, try again. And with Virgo, I'm always saying it doesn't matter how many times you fall off the wagon. What matters is that you get back up one more time and try one more
Yeah,
time.
that's
And in
yeah.
that case, even when Mars feels like it's blocked,
Hmm.
it can be a friend for your soul, because that first
Hmm.
house, well, that first house, Scorpio, it'll intuit another way, and it'll intuit another way, and it'll just keep intuiting other ways to make an effort going forward,
Hmm.
regardless of any sense of blockage or paralyzation.
Hmm. That's really true. Thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Sure. Well, thank you for allowing us to look at your chart. I'm going to assume that if
Thank you.
Leroy has been silent, that there wasn't anything on the little message board there. So yes, thank you, volunteer, and we'll connect later this week. Okay? And Leroy may have muted you. He gets a little on that. So for our sake of time, I am going to move us along. Let me see how I do this. I'm going to see if I can keep my pointer up there. Oh, yep, it allows me to go forward. And so um, within the first quarter phase, there is the biseptile, about 103 degrees with the harmonics of 7. And when we start to move into this Mars Pluto degree, this is where the new desires that we are becoming aware of, they take on a very individualized and specific manifestation. And the septiles are always known as keywords, a sense of special destiny. And this is the second septile. This is the bi. And so being in first quarter phase, being yang, what will happen is it will appear as if certain circumstances come at us that will appear to be fated, that will then help us fine tune our path forward within the first quarter phase. Whereas the septile at 51 degrees, that's in the crescent phase and it's yin energy. And we will ourselves kind of realign our path. The biseptile and yang phase, energy going outward, which can also be then that energy coming at us, it again fine tunes those fated events or circumstances that help us really refine the manifestation of our desires on a highly individualistic way. Mars specific to that natal Pluto sign and house. And so as we then, I will give the rest of the aspects here after this next volunteer chart, but it just so happens that our next volunteer has a Mars Pluto angle of 107 degrees. It is 4 degrees beyond the biseptile aspect. And those minor aspects, quintiles, septiles, etc., there's a little bit of a lesser degree that we use with those. So I'm kind of back and forth on whether you would say that this volunteer had this specific aspect. It might not be that anymore, but they're going to feel the energy coming off of that aspect with this Mars Pluto phase. And so this volunteer, just very quickly, the chart is February 25th, 1975, 5:23 p.m., Barrie, Ontario, Canada. Here we're going to be working with an 8th house Pluto retrograde in Libra at about 9 degrees, second house. Did I say 8th house Pluto? 9 degrees Libra. retrograde, second house. Mars is over there, 26 degrees Capricorn, here in the fifth house. And so, very briefly, this soul feels that she is first stage spirituated. Dad Catholic, mom Protestant, mother agreed to raise the kids in Catholicism. She has an older brother, younger sister. There was sexual abuse between ages 5 to 8 by her mother's father. Her brother died when she was 14. That is when she stopped going to church and really broke out and started looking at occult studies. She worked on the family fish farm. She was married at 19, 2 children, divorced at 25. Her first ex was very mentally and verbally abusive. She had a second marriage at 29. She had 2 children in this marriage. She was just deciding to divorce the second husband when she realized she was pregnant. This ex developed depression and he turned to alcohol to move through it. They worked together. She worked in his office for his small business. She today is currently single. She works in the healing field under several modalities. And she was just recently, I use different words, she was just recently labeled with a breast cancer imbalance. And so it is, she was willing to share this, and it turned her world topsy-turvy here most recently. So let me just briefly say just a couple of things, and then we'll bring volunteer in for feedback and her own understandings. Second house Pluto, well, Pluto Libra, this is one of the relationship generations, relationships not based upon on equality typically, and they go through those extremes of dominating, being dominated, having to speak up, or having to learn to acquiesce into more equality. We can see with both of these, she had to stand up for herself for various reasons. That retrograde energy will lend itself to standing up in regards to that. But within that Pluto Libra generation, she's a Taurus soul. She's a second house Pluto. She will have survival issues. I have a tendency to find that Taurus souls can come in with really, really strong life forces and just overcome all kinds of life and death situations. Sometimes, though, a Taurus soul will come in with all kinds of health issues throughout their entire lifetime and have the opposite of that, a low life force, so to speak. And of course, there can be everything in between. So one of the things you always do in environmental conditionings with second house Plutos is you want to get that feedback on where you feel they are at in that range. It sounds like this volunteer may be in the stronger life force archetype, and this health situation may be relative to coming off of the bisextile aspect with Mars to Pluto, and it really may be galvanizing her to take responsibility for herself and to discover her own sense of living, her own sense of life force. The fifth house and Leo archetype, one of their key words is life force as well. And so this may be going on where she had the situations and circumstances come up in both marriages where she said, I can't do this anymore, where she broke free from the church with her brother's transition. As you can see, again, we're 4 degrees off of the bisextile one more time, but it just seems that there has been these circumstances that are showing up that just shows her into the chaos of really needing to realign. And relative to the second house, Pluto, and how do I survive? How do I take care of myself physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually with a Taurus soul? The Mars here is needing to have this complete and utter expression of who am I and how am I taking charge of my life regardless of what shows up in my world. So at this point, Leroy, if you could unmute our second volunteer and we can get some feedback from her.
Hi.
Hi, I hear you.
Oh,
Welcome.
right on. Thank you.
So, as you have been listening to anything that has been said with our slides from class today, or anything specific first quarter phase, the biseptile, feedback from you.
The taking charge part really, really hits home. Like, I mean, I could see that all the way back, even to the sexual abuse, when I had to stand up for myself and just say, this needs to stop. And it did. It just stopped, which floored me. I can, like, you know, you remember it like it was yesterday. And
Who did you speak up to? Did you speak up to the your maternal grandfather, or?
yeah, directly. I just looked him right in the eye and I said, this, I don't like this. I don't want you to do this anymore. And he stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Continue.
as far as like even the creative side of things, after my brother died, my brother and father were working on the fish farm. And so after he passed away, I had expressed to my dad that I really wanted to do counseling. And, you know, after conversation, he's like, oh, well, you know, maybe that might not be the idea. Why don't you think about coming to work on the farm? And I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know, I like the outdoors. I like this. I like doing that. And so I kind of just rolled right into that and lost myself in the process, if that makes any sense. And it took a couple of blow ups or situations that made me kind of really stand back, that I had to look at them and say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I didn't even realize too that I had gotten lost in the process until I actually, you know, was confronted with that. And it was almost like I was holding back what I wanted, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Same goes for when I started working with my husband's heating and cooling business as well. He decided to go ahead and start his own business. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I can help. And then of course I just dive in, right? And before I know it, I'm lost in the mix and I'm sitting there going, wow, this is really not what I want to do, right? And then something blows up and then I have to stand up and say, okay, yeah, no, this is not good, on many levels, on the business front, but then also in our relationship as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So you can see that you're within that first quarter phase of really having to manifest yourself being able to take charge of your own life. And you can also see, coming off with the biseptile aspect here, how many times there would be something that would come along and which you would say, wait a minute, yes, no, yes, no.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure,
Absolutely.
sure. And I would say that in, you know, the same regard, your latest, you know, health situation
Mm-hmm.
is also bringing about the same theme and pattern.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
I really feel like because I've been in fight or flight mode for so long, being in the relationship that I was, having 4 children, you know, working full time, trying to take care of the home, trying to do damage control, basically, between children and the father type of thing. I really missed the signals from my own body. It was almost like I just didn't see them because I just kept going. And I think that's why this kind of all happened, to say, hey, pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is just as a reminder for anyone participating or listening, you know, what can happen with second house Pluto's Taurus souls. They're very good at getting stuck in their rut, so to speak. Jeffrey will call it the frog in the well syndrome, where this is what gives me my security. I feel safe and secure in my own little circumstances and situations. And what that then lends to the picture is via the polarity 8th house, we have the cataclysmic explosion that rearranges the landscape in some way. Relative to being a Pluto Libra generation and that being the cardinal modality, there's a bit of energy to pull yourself up out of the bottom of the well when you make that Aryan polarity effort, okay? But you could probably still, from time to time, find those situations and circumstances in life where you're in a rut and you've got to be, you know, woken up. And
Absolutely.
that's what the Mars Pluto is doing. And so what Mars will do is it will take you out of that comfort zone of the second house. It will take you out of that comfort zone in the relationship status quo, however dysfunctional it will be. This will take you out of that comfort zone, and again, it's really pushing you to manifest taking charge of your own life. Now, for those of you who are following this series, we're not doing entire chart interpretations. We are having to go in and focus on a specific archetypes and lessening right here, Mars-Pluto phasal relationships. So relative to the conjunction, the first quarter phase or new phase relative to the 45 crescent phase, first quarter 90 degrees. We know that she's had 3 primary lifetimes now of having the second house Pluto. We don't know how many secondary lifetimes there have been within each of those phases, but we would count this Mars-Pluto phasal relationship as being a secondary lifetime within the first quarter phase. So it's not brand new to go, wait a minute, first quarter yang phase, I have got to manifest these desires within my soul. Even though we have coming off of the 103 degree biseptile, you know, what appears to be, you know, fated events and circumstances that come along, the soul goes, oh, I get it. So that's what that secondary lifetime is doing. It's grounding the first quarter phase. I've got to manifest. I've got to manifest. And that's what allows you to then stand up to grandfather. This is wrong. Stand up to the husbands. This is not for me in relationships. Stand up to father. This is not for me with career. Stand up to ex. This is not for me with career and finding my own creativity. You have a there's an awareness there. Okay. Oh, got to make this shift. Got to make this change. So volunteer, any other archetypes relative to second house Pluto?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm still in a bit of a whirlwind because of
I
everything.
I understand. I'm just always pretty Virgo-like and making sure that I ask questions or get input. I will bring into this picture because we can see here that we have moon square the nodes and south node is resolution node for the moon. We have sun that is square the nodes and the north node is resolution node for the sun. We've done prior classes on planets square the nodes if you need to refer back to those. But let's just, so we know that there's skip steps here with emotional self-reliance and really being able to identify and figure out what your own emotions and emotional needs are. Jeffrey Green never felt that you could have skip steps with the sun, but the sun could still be square both nodes and the sun can go back and forth. So I would say that there would be perhaps some confusion here with your own creative self-identity, and sun rules Mars by house, as you can see, fifth house. So there's confusion with your own self-identity and creativity relative to manifesting this Pluto Mars. And then as these are squared, these nodes here, and we look at a second house Pluto in Libra with the south node in Gemini 10th house, if we look at this relative to survivalism and career, you have Pluto in an Earth archetype, the second house. You have that south node in an Earth archetype, 10th house. And yes, it is in the midst of a grand trine with Mercury and Pluto. Relative to the fact that you will also have planets square these nodes, it can be, there is perhaps this Gemini go along to get along in regards to survivalism and career creativity.
Absolutely.
And there can be this Gemini 10th house south node, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but not necessarily fully applying yourself to what you want to manifest creatively with this Mars Pluto and relative to, this north node here. Neptune in aspect to anything can create confusion, no matter the sign or the house. So you can see how it could have taken you time in this lifetime to get clarity on what is truth for you, and to really work to do it on emotional levels with the node in the fourth, the moon square these nodes, okay? And so you've had to be emotionally shocked, polarity point, into your body sometimes to then go, and this is how I really need to move forward for me emotionally. And all this adds into this picture with the Mars-Pluto phase of really taking charge of your own life and your own creativity. So this could be part of the signature of being, the slow bloomer in Capricorn and coming into your own career and what really works for you. And obviously, with that sun, moon, square the nodes and being in mutable signs, it's going to have to be something that has some degree of alignment with natural law, natural spirituality, something that cardinal modalities you have to initiate and do for yourself. And so
That totally
everything,
rings true.
yeah, thank you. everything that you're going to do in healing with your situation, I'm going to and give me feedback. Are you doing a combination of alternative and traditional? Alternative only? Is it too new to know what you're going to do yet?
It's going to be a combination of both.
Mm-hmm. Sure. What I was leading towards is from the perspective of the alternative healing modalities. Everything that you learn is could easily be relative to the sun, moon, square the nodes, and mutable signs, could be that, remembering of all kinds of alternative healing modalities. Let me say something in this regard, and this is coming out of left field with the other work that I do. And for those of you who are not aware of this, I have spent 20 years in the energy modality for self-healing. But it is using computers. It's the field of radionics, if you want to go Google it. And the first radionics machine was created in the 1930s by an American medical doctor called Royal Rife. And so sometimes they're called Rife machines. And so I've worked with an organization for the last 24 years that will take your photograph and impart healing frequencies into it 24/7. As an aside, we've discovered 11 variations of the coronavirus frequency to date since last December for humans, canines, and felines. We found it to be in those 3 species so far. From that work, what I know on an energetic level is 9 out of 10 humans are born with the frequency of cancer. And the frequency of cancer, a cancer imbalance as it goes in my languaging, it is past life energy that is unconscious, and it is always related to the emotion of bitterness. And so anytime we want to go through a self-healing of a cancer imbalance, we have to melt the bitterness so that we can release and shed it. And one of the ways in which we will melt the bitterness is through forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and forgiveness of others. And you have a Virgo moon, and you have Mercury in the 6th house. One of the best ways of doing that is the Ho'oponopono prayer. Ho'oponopono is Hawaiian for forgiveness, so the Hawaiian forgiveness prayer. And you can go research that on the internet and find a lot. For me, I've put it into 4 different ways, or 4 steps to the forgiveness prayer. Step 1 is I love you, or I care about you as a human being. Relative to you, volunteer, it would be I love me. Step 2 is I'm sorry for, and you list whatever circumstances with another person, or in your case with yourself. I am sorry that I have manifested these cancer cells or this cancer energy within the orbs of my breasts. Step 3 is please forgive me. Step 4 is I forgive you. And so step 3 for you would be please forgive me. And step 4 is I do forgive me. I do love me. I am a child of Source in each and every cell of my being. Just a little aside for you, okay? That
Thank you.
biceptal thing's coming at you, all right? And so if I may, let me check in with Leroy. Any comments or questions from anybody? I will move forward with a few more aspects, and then volunteer comments or questions from you.
Just that you hit everything right on the head, especially with coming into my own creative in a creative way, as far as work and what I feel I'm here to do. I'm just starting that journey now.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Well, and one final comment being, the second house Pluto, okay, with an 8th house polarity point. And of course, Venus moving towards a conjunction with this polarity point. Your soul is really at an evolutionary point where taking, complete and utter self-responsibility for yourself, self-reliance, Venus ruling Pluto directly on a soul level, being second house Taurus soul. It really is for you to take charge of your own life and to manifest those abilities to heal yourself physically, but provide for yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So even that ruler Venus participates for you in that Mars Pluto phase. All right, Leroy, you can be silent if there's no comments or questions from anybody else. And thank you everyone for allowing us to just, do pick and choose in the chart. Even though you may be sparking all over the place, we've got to stay germane to Mars Pluto. And so moving forward then with a few more aspects, all right? The next aspect that we will then come to in this phase is, of course, the trine, and we call this the waxing trine or the first quarter trine, the 120-degree aspect. And here's where everything, as you can start to see from 90 degrees to the 120, here's where everything has been coming together through all that prior effort to actually to actualize, to creatively actualize. And so whatever those new desires were with Mars and Pluto from the conjunction, here is the fullness of manifestation. Here's the fullness of self creating those desires from that conjunction point. That 120-degree mark is the apex of self. It's 0 degrees Leo in the natural zodiac, okay? So here's where we are full of self. And there is a potential to be consciously aware of the entire process, the 0 to 120, that led to this point of being able to manifest these desires. And so whatever is here for us in our personal reality when we have Mars Pluto at this point is going to reflect all of this evolutionary process to this point. There will be an ease of understanding, an ease of making the necessary tasks, an ease to integrate self and whatever these desires are that we're manifesting. They will be accepted by society. They will be understood by society. We can be seen. We can be understood. What will happen there with the trine is also an ease of resisting. There is a risk of stagnating at this mark between Mars and Pluto. I've manifested it. I am full of my creativity. I'm just going to do it again. And I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to do it again. And here too, even though we're not relating to any signs or houses, there can be the stuck in a rut. There can, again, be that stagnation. And so the manifestations there are with the effort, but we can even move into the been there, done that if we don't continue to make an effort. And so even when Mars Pluto is at this 120-degree aspect, it still requires us to take what it is we can manifest and how do I move it into society? How do I evolve? How do I move forward? And so what that then will lead to as we move through these degrees between Pluto and Mars is we eventually end up at the Sesqui squadrate aspect less than 135 degrees. We get to 130, 30, 131, 32, 33, 34. And we start to feel the pressure building up of getting ready to change from yang to yin phase. Any of you who, work with clients and charts, I would always draw in the 45-degree and aspects and the square and a half aspects, which are 135 degrees and 215. No, 225, excuse me. The semi-squares are 45 and 315, and the Sesqui squadrates are 135 and 225. Draw those up in the grid of the aspects, because when any two planets are changing from yang to yin energy, the tighter that aspect before or after, it is just as strong as squares and conjunctions and oppositions. And so here we're getting ready to make that transition from the egocentric structure of the personality to society and what society may need. We'll learn in next month's class that the gibbous phase contains the gibbous inconjunct, the 150-degree aspect, which is everything that makes up that gibbous phase. But we start to get the inklings of this the closer we get to Mars and Pluto reaching the 135-degree mark. And so this is a natural and necessary reaction to all the assertion of our ego and manifesting our desires that Mars and Pluto have been doing since the 90-degree mark with each other. And again, we have to evolve the desired nature. We have to evolve that evolutionary process. And we've reached the apex of doing it from the fullness of ourself only. And we now have to start moving into where we can take another or society into consideration with this. And so there will be some types of humiliation or falls from grace. There will be something that becomes that butt edit that stops us in our tracks and has us looking outside of ourselves and saying, oh, I have to take that into consideration. So the ego is starting to learn how to align itself with whatever the needs of our social environment are for us personally, and whatever the needs of the social environment are outside of ourselves. And so if you see Mars Pluto at 130 degrees or 133, and they're within orbit of that aspect, but it's less than 135, you naturally look for where any of those two planets will have resistance and blockage. And so relative to Mars and Pluto, it's going to reach this point where they can't manifest the desires. That natal Pluto by sign and house, it has resistance and blockage from society in manifesting the desires through that Mars signature by its own sign and house. So we start that process of analyzing and reflecting, why can't I manifest? What's blocking me? And you will then find clues through both Pluto by sign and house and Mars by sign and house. And so hopefully what we will do through this series is, those of you who start or are working with your own clients, you will always be looking for, what is that phase of Mars to Pluto? And is there a specific aspect? It can give some foundation to coloring the whole chart and how well the soul's learning those Pluto sign house lessons and where it is on the evolutionary journey of that. And so finally, at less than 135 degrees, here Mars and Pluto are learning to adjust a very strong sense of the individualized purpose to their desired nature and adjusting it to whatever the overall needs of society is. All right, that is the last slide for this class. I didn't even pay any attention to the time. I haven't done too bad for our delayed start. Questions or comments on anything, either one of the charts we looked at or Mars, Pluto in the first quarter phase? Any comments or questions from any of the material? All right. Sounds like Leroy is just being quiet, so you can see on your screen here, we're back to the third Tuesdays of the month. No class in August. I have 2 volunteers for each. I think I have 2 volunteers for each of the upcoming classes. I've had a little back and forth with people really having to look at their Mars-Pluto phases. Looks like we need 1 volunteer for last quarter phase, 1 more. I already have 1 volunteer, I think. And then here are, I did a Mars and Aquarius 2-part series, which you can still access with us. I will do a public webinar on the nodal axis in Gemini Sag, April 27th, and then May 6th will be Venus retrograde in Gemini before we have another Mercury retrograde. And I also have a free public webinar coming up with EA Zoom meetings the end of this month, April 30th. The coronavirus, public figures, and emerging trends, if you care to tune into that one. So thank you everyone who patiently stayed with us through our start stops. And one more time, Leroy and I are doing just fine up here on our cliff. We are naturally socially isolated by lifestyle, so it hasn't been too big of adjustments for us. And I hope that all of you are doing well yourselves. Stay safe, everyone. All the best.